Okay, we're picking this up. We're back with Ted. I had to switch devices. I ran out of memory on my other recorder. So we were talking about the old growth pine, and see, we're out of the fire now, and we're into. You can see the density of this forest.
This is totally unnatural.
And unnatural because
too many trees, and there's too much stuff on it. Too much fuels, which dead limbs, trees, pine needles on the ground. You have to mechanically clean and harvest this, get this way at, cut most of this forest out. But see, they won't cut anything over, a lot of these stewardships, they won't cut anything over 12 inches in diameter. So you can't even fix the problem in the first place.
So who did that work back before they were all involved? Was it the timber companies that, because they had to...
Before they did it the way you would harvest a garden.
Right.
They took the ripe and the defect, even the disease, and then they thin the little stuff out.
And this was private industry that was doing this.
Yeah, but it was under the control of the forest.
Under regulation of the forest.
See, that's another big fire that burned out there about 10 years ago. I don't know if we'll be able to see it again, but this is, if they don't drastically change, all this is gone within a matter of a few more years.
Wow.
They've burnt so much forest to the ground that look like this or nicer. This is one of their stewardship deals here, and it's still not thinned out good enough.
So I'm old enough to remember when the Endangered Species Act kind of started kicking in the 80s, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when the Forest Service started taking more personal control over the forests and
well, they've had control over this since 1908, but before they understood that they had to use it to preserve it, to save it. You can't. This is an area right here that is called an old growth area, so they won't do anything in there. So what that's going to do, it's just going to keep getting thicker and thicker, and stuff dying, loading up on the forest floor, and you get a spark in it, it's gone.
So rather than manage it, harvest it,
here's another fire, but this is one of their prescribed fires. This is what they want to do, and they burn all this. Well, it kills a lot of the trees and damages probably 80% of the trees, but I mean, there's no benefit to that. Zero. And then they will not salvage any of those big trees, which those big trees are worth over $1,000 a piece.
Right.
A lot of those will have old fire scars in them, so they'll catch on fire and they'll burn and fall over. Right there's one.
Yeah.
That was a...
Ooh, that's a monstrous tree.
Yeah, and if you walked out through there, you would find hundreds of those.
Yeah.
And it's insane. This other fire started right back in behind this here.
The Canyon Creek fire?
Yeah, that was the other one.
Wow.
And
we've been driving quite a while. That gives you an idea how much ground that covered.
It's 14 miles from my house. And that came that way, most of that in just a few hours.
Wow.
This is Bear Valley. And then when the fire switched, it burnt almost back to Seneca's right there. The fire burned almost back to there. And then it's burnt for probably 20 miles that way.
The Canyon Creek fire.
Yeah.
So it started clear out here. Or actually it started in two places.
One of them started right back in behind that house there, not too far. And it started in completed stewardship projects.
Wow.
Stuff that they're telling everybody is going to prevent these fires and stop these catastrophic fires.
That's their signature management plan. It's where this all started.
It's a bunch of talking points and lies.
Yeah. Looks good on a spreadsheet, I suppose.
And that's why I said a lot of this stuff sounds good, but when you go to apply it, it's or if you know anything about what they're saying, the exact opposite is the real truth.
Well, this is what I hear from so many people when I get out to these rural communities and I talk with folks that have been there their whole lives, 3, 4, 5 generations, some of them.
So you can see part of this burn back in here. We've got so many where you can see the snow through the trees there.
Yeah.
There, back there. See those bare areas?
Yeah. Oh, that's a burn. Yeah, you can see it.
Burn up big, beautiful timber, and they let most of it still standing or laying on the ground there.
Well, what I'm hearing is that the folks that reside on the land
that's all burnt.
There.
All those mountains there, those high mountains, burnt in fire. That's the strawberry.
That's the strawberry?
That's the Strawberry Mountains.
And that's still the Canyon Creek fire, though, that consumed that.
That's all wilderness up high there, though. Those highest mountains. That's nuked. I mean, it's dead.
So did they consult with the people like yourself that know what the
They don't.
You know?
They'll make fun of you when you. I mean, I told them 10 or 12 years prior, multiple times. I took the head of the Forest Service, the state forestry, our county court. I took them on a tour and told them they couldn't let fires burn in that canyon. I told them they needed to move the wilderness back and clean it up, and they basically laughed at me. We told them their stewardship projects out here would be ineffective in fire, and we were exactly right, and they laughed at us.
My word.
So
And now, how do you think that? How did they do in handling that fire when it started?
pathetic. They could have had both those fires out the first day, easily.
Which historically, that's what people have done in these communities. A lot of the people themselves deal with them. They know what to do and how to manage them, right?
What it is they've made this firefighting a multi-billion-dollar, industry. Rather than make money from harvesting a forest, people are making money from burning our forests. And there's several companies that's basically all they do, and they make hundreds of millions of dollars doing it.
And they're private companies, but they're not really private companies.
They're private companies, but they're also involved in the management process.
Right.
It's so connected and so corrupt. It's unbelievable. That fire burnt clean to Strawberry Mountain there, and that had burnt.
Wow.
That high peak there, and that had burnt in '96 before, and it reburned a bunch of that.
It's just amazing the scope.
That's another fire right there. That only burned about 6,000 acres. But that's been, you notice how it looks pretty bare now, because most of that dead stuff is fell over.
Yeah.
And then if you look over in there, not those bare mountains, but on past them, there's more big fires there that burnt. And they never salvaged anything off them either. They wasted all that. I mean, you're not just talking a few dollars. They're wasting, just in this county alone, billions upon billions of dollars worth of natural resources.
Well, I'm hearing tales of, and I actually don't think they're tales. I think it's fact. I'm hearing people tell me about, just like you were starting to say there, they make money on these fires, and there's a lot of money made because they get federal allocated funds, right?
Oh yeah.
So
it's
probably, and I don't know how much, but it's grossly more than if they were to utilize money to properly manage it. It costs them 10 times more to deal with this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And then see, it's like, take for instance this fire up here. It probably burnt, I'm thinking probably 10 years ago. I might have to check, but they said they salvaged it. They barely salvaged it. They salvaged maybe 1 or 2% of the timber on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now all that stuff's laying on the ground. They've planted a lot of that. So what they do, they got those trees coming through, up through all those logs laying on the ground.
Yeah.
It will burn again, and they'll have wasted all their money planting trees, and then it'll burn a bunch of the forest outside of that fire on top of that. It'll make an uncontrollable fire. But here's another thing by not salvaging. When you have the fire like that, what most people don't see is if you don't salvage it, and even if you do salvage it, you'll still have some amount of bugs. But if you don't salvage it, you have a huge infestation of bugs, and they move out of the burned area, and they'll kill just as many trees as a fire did over the period of the next 10 or 12 years. So what's going to happen here is you're going to start seeing trees, red trees start popping up all through that over the next 10, 15 years outside of the burned area. So they're even going to make the problem worse.
You mean red trees infested?
Yeah, the ones that died from bugs.
Yeah. Wow.
So they're
compounded.
And if you look over there, if you look real close, you can see red trees over there right now.
Yep. You can see them right on the edge of the tree line there.
And that's about where that fire started. The first part of it is a total kill. It went through on the ground. It killed a lot of trees, though.
So what they tend
and
to...
it's hard to tell, with the lighting and stuff now that whether it's burned or not, it looks alive, but it's not.
So when there's a fire and they're sent out to it, do they get right on it and do their best to extinguish it as quick as possible?
A lot of the time they do, but they never on these for sure. When you fire 101, once you think you have a fire out, you always keep somebody 24/7 on that fire to make sure it's out for an extended period of time. This fire here, they said they had it out. They pulled all the equipment and all the personnel, 100% of them, off the fire.
Left nobody monitoring
it. And they come back late the next day, and they had a spot fire that got away from it. And it run to the north from here. So you can see the red trees up in there. That's about where that fire started. It's right there.
Yeah.
Where those red trees are.
And the red trees are bug infested. And
they're dead.
They've died from.
They're dead. Once a tree turns red, it's dead.
And they may, I suppose that some of those could be fire damage as well. But you say in a not long here, all the outlying trees from the other areas.
10, 15 years the bug infestation will go on for years. And it doesn't matter whether it's a forest fire or a broadcast burn, which they call prescribed burns. They've done that to play with words, psychology, but it makes huge populations of bugs because they damage so many. The fire damages so many trees, it weakens them. And not only does it weaken them for bugs to kill them, it also weakens them and opens them up to pathogens, which will rot them, turn the centers rotten, and also diseases like mistletoe and spore type diseases, like Indian paint and stuff like that, which rots the centers. It culls the trees out. It ruins
devastating to them. Yeah.
Ruins them over a period of time. So it's basically like cancer. I mean, that's what you're opening it up to cancer. It'd be like, when a person gets burned, their skin, then you get open to infections and stuff like that. Well, it's the same with trees.
With a tree, yeah. Well, now if they've got they're hiring private companies to come in and fight the fires. Is that right? The Forest Service doesn't have their own fire crew anymore. Both. They do a little both. Yeah. And one of the themes that I keep hearing is they'll milk a fire a little bit. The longer they fight it, the more money, more budget allocation they get, right?
And you got to understand, this isn't the actual person on the ground that's doing the work.
Yeah.
It's the management and the policies.
Right.
They say, well, firefighting is dangerous. I'm going to tell you something. the way they fight fire now, it isn't dangerous. Firefighting in reality, if you're fighting fire, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
But they make it even more dangerous by playing with these fires when they're little and letting them get big, because a big fire is way more dangerous than a little tiny fire.
Sure. It's also big money, though.
And this is 2017. There's no reason with our technology, even as bad as our forests are managed,
yeah,
which you couldn't do a worse job of managing these forests if you were trying to destroy them. You couldn't do a worse job. In 2017, a fire should never be over 10 acres. We have the technology to put these out.
I would think so. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me that we'd be having these kind of fires, you know, with the management systems and the technology and the years of experience that folks like yourself, you know, they're just not. The problem is they're not drawn from that experience. They got college kids making decisions on this stuff, right?
Well, they got these educated people that they've educated the way they want them to believe.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it is just BS. I mean, we do not need to ever reintroduce fires to our forests, and if we work with nature, we can make these forests better than nature ever made them alone. If we work with nature.
You work with it, yeah.
But we're not working with nature. We're doing nature. That's the way nature harvested the forest and kept the forest from getting too
balanced.
Thick. Is they burn them.
Yeah.
They burn them very frequently.
Uh-huh.
So you never had anything that was like this.
Yeah.
In eastern Oregon.
The fires blow through. They burn the fuel on the ground, leave the trees standing.
Might kill a few of them.
Yep.
But now it's, I mean, you catch that on fire, it's a total stand replacement fire.
It gets so intense, and there's so much fuel that it kills all the trees, kills everything, just wipes it out.
This is an old growth area. I mean, the trees just keep dying in this by the piles. Look at the big logs laying on the ground there. I mean, 20 pounds of wood equals about a gallon of fuel oil in BTUs when it's burned. So you figure out one of those big trees can weigh 10,000 pounds.
So how many pounds of wood?
20 pounds.
20 pounds. Okay.
So that could be pine needles, that could be pine cones, pine limbs, logs.
Right.
So 20 pounds equals about a pound of fuel oil and BTUs released when it burns. So,
and you said earlier that 200, the acceptable ground fuel was 2
tons.
Or 2 tons.
All this exceeds it.
And what do you think they had in this fire?
I know
before this fire.
I know there's places in this that exceeded 500 tons.
Wow. So 2.5 times what it should be.
250 times what it should be.
Okay, give me that again then. So 2 tons. You should.
2 tons.
Uh-huh.
Your lower drier ground. Some of this up in here you might be able to go as high as 5 or 6 tons.
Uh huh.
If you had your timber spaced out like it should be.
Right.
That's pine needles, pine cones. That's if you took an acre of ground and you raked everything that would burn, raked it up in a pile and weighed it.
But you said they had 500 tons?
There was places in this fire that had over 500
Oh my
tons.
word. Oh.
It was logs 10 and 12 feet deep, crisscrossed on the ground.
Jesus.
And that's why you get these fires that look like thermonuclear bombs going off.
Yep.
This fire here, these 2 fires here made it smoky in North and South Carolina.
Is that right?
So that ought to tell you.
Wow.
They talk about carbon being released.
Yeah.
These 2 fires probably released more carbon than all the people in this state do for many, many years.
Right. Right. Yeah, I can only imagine. I remember it was a serious event. It was.
There was another one burning in Baker at the same time, and NASA. It made red flags go off at NASA. They thought thermonuclear bombs were going off. They said that these 3 fires were equivalent to 300 or 400 Hiroshima bombs coming off the energy release.
Are you serious? And these are pretty graphic fires that don't happen every day or every year, but when they do, they're so devastating.
They're going to just get worse and worse and worse.
And it seems to be.
We start combating the problem. We have too many trees, way too many trees, and we have way too much ground fuel. So ground fuel is your primary fuel. Your live standing trees are your secondary fuels. And see, we're on the edge of the fire right here now. Let's see, look at the logs laying on the ground.
Yeah, they're everywhere. There's just didn't turn quite in time, but there's timber down over up in there.
It's buried under 4 feet of snow, but there's great big logs underneath all this. And I mean, then you're going to have a lot of this. This is part of their stewardship. It survived here, but you have a lot of those trees that are damaged there that are going to die. And they won't harvest them. They'll waste them.
When you say waste them, they just basically don't touch it. They're going to let them sit there and
fall over and rot
and become ground fuel, basically.
They've wasted enough timber in this county in the last 25 years. If they would have sold it, just given it to the residents that live here, every man, woman, and child would be a multi-millionaire.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's billions and billions.
Incredible amount of natural resources that are just being.
What's sad
not only are they going to waste, they're becoming a hazard for the residents and the rest of the forest.
These big old growth trees, they take 200 to 400 years to grow them like that. And that's some very expensive wood in those old growth pines, and they waste it. I mean, that's insanity.
So they have the ability, and we talked about this earlier, but I want to make sure everybody understands this. How many acres was this fire?
110,000.
110,000 acres
That's
of
all
timber.
burnt in front of us.
Yeah. And the trees are dead. A lot of them are dead, but you can harvest them for a couple of years after the fire, right?
Yeah.
And still have usable timber.
The fir you can get for a couple of years. The pine, the first year.
You got a year. You got a year on the pine.
It's going to be blued. The larger diameter pine would still have some value, but
so
I mean, that's snooped. I mean, it don't look like you think, well, those are trees. Well, they're all dead.
They're all dead. And so they could have allowed private industry, or they themselves, they could have come and harvested this timber, which would have minimalized the future threat of the rest of the forest, right? But instead they leave it, they let it deteriorate. Billions of dollars worth of revenue could have been.
Oh yeah.
Billions of dollars worth of revenue.
Another thing about a tree is when you harvest, say you harvest a tree that's worth $1, by the time you get done, logging that, hauling it to a mill and turning it into boards, that same money is turned over 8 to 12 times in your local account, your local economy.
That's right.
So what happens is you starve the economy. You keep. Say you had $1 billion worth of timber you wasted here. That's 8 to 12 $billion you kept out of our local economy. Jeez. So if you took this county and you put 8 or 10 or 12 $billion into our local economy one year, we would be a completely different place.
And yes, and that's what is so devastating to me, being a native Oregonian myself, and coming from a timber town. I grew up in Springfield and saw the impact of this on communities and families and such. John Day, for example, was a thriving town.
Oh yeah.
I mean, gold was the initial industry here, but then it became timber, right?
Yep.
After the gold rush was over and everything, and you had mills. You had, people don't realize you get a tree, you got a guy cutting a tree, you got guys driving trucks to the mills, you got the mills working, you got all the supporting companies that support the mills and the logging companies, from the accountants to the tire manufacturers, the truck makers, everything else. These towns flourished, absolutely flourished, and they were thriving communities, and people were did well. They made good money. The families were intact, and everything was really productive and really thriving. And then they come in and choked it all out.
Yes, gotcha.
With several different measures, but most all of them, all of the issues that caused these towns to be emaciated were federal type uh, regulations and whatnot. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these towns, it's sad to see because.
And this isn't the end of this. There's going to be lots of complications from doing this. There's going to be other catastrophic fires from this, and the multiple floods that are coming to our two towns, which are downstream, are going to be catastrophic. Right during the fire, we had some meetings for the people that got the house. The second meeting was the governor, our governor, Kate Brown. And I told them, I talked to her personally, but I told them in the meeting that they needed to immediately dig the creek channel through the two towns, which is Canyon Creek, dig it out and make it bigger and wider and deeper.
To be able to handle this.
And instead, she told me, and I quote, "We'll see what we can do about it." And I said, I don't want you to see what you can do about it. I want you to do it, because you have the authority to make these agencies let our county do it.
Yes.
Instead, the
state reigns.
She turned around. We had one flood control dam in this canyon, and she had the state come in and tear it out.
Remove the dam.
Remove the dam.
That was, oh my God.
And they claim it wasn't safe and this and that. It's another bunch of big lies.
Yeah.
The floods that are coming here, and you'll watch this in the near future. Could be as early as this spring, because we have the snow load to wipe these towns out.
Imagine all that snow melting, and it all goes down into one tributary, right?
One little tiny creek. There's 40,000 acres in this, and it has anywhere from 1 to probably 15 feet of snow on it right now.
Jeez. Heavy year for snow here.
Yeah, this drains the biggest snow load area of this county. Some of that's almost up to 9,000 feet.
Unbelievable.
So when this floods, it's Kate Brown. People of this county and the people in this country need to remember Kate Brown is the one that tied up any digging out of the creek channel through town, and then she tore out our only dam.
The only control means you had.
It was just one small dam, but
well, and many of you watching this will remember that was one of her big pursuits, was to rid Oregon of all of the harmful dams.
Well,
right?
they've been wanting to tear that dam out for years. And I finally found out what the reason was. They had so much opposition in this county about tearing it out because it was one of the best places to recreate. Well, it's all burnt in this fire, but the real reason, they said it was unsafe, but that was not true at all.
Yeah.
The real thing is they wanted to have an undammed tributary for steelhead, but here's the problem. The dam is built above a big slide that fish can't even get up in the first place. So they wanted to spend $6 or $8 million on a fish ladder up that slide, and then they tore the dam out. So I imagine the fish ladders thing is coming.
Right.
So, but that's the real reason for them tearing it out.
See how successful that is.
You know, the state highways already put in bigger culverts because they're anticipating massive amounts of water. But it's going to be multiple times. This will not heal back. You will not have this be able to absorb water.
Because it's all burned.
It won't be able to absorb it as good as it did before the fire for hundreds of years. It's not fixed as soon as the grass grows back.
Well, imagine the amount of precipitation those trees absorb just in their needles and stuff, and then what they draw out of the ground. You know.
Well, another thing to look at. This was a closed canopy forest. before the fire, so 65% of the moisture never got to the ground.
Oh, is that right?
That's the studies.
Oh my word!
So
you can imagine all that water hitting the ground.
We're getting probably a minimum of 50% more water to the ground to begin with, and then there's nothing to absorb it.
And they're not doing anything about that.
No.
So, folks, you're gonna see another report here, probably in a matter of months, when this all floods.
And that'll do hundreds of millions or more.
Yep.
Dollars worth of damage to the people here. The long-term damage to the landowners here is hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's because not only can they harvest, timber. Here we do not clear cut very much because it's a pine stand. You do selective logging, and from time to time, a person might need money to pay their property tax, or they might have some medical. They always have a bank account standing in their trees, so they can always make a little money.
Yep.
Well, if you have this will be fine in here, but the only green is right here on this private ground. I mean, if you've seen, there's nothing green above it.
Yeah.
But these people that have been.
It's interesting. The private ground kind of survived it. Why is that? Because they had it cleaned up, right?
Almost all this private ground was very well managed.
Yep. And you can see here. You can see the lower elevations where the private ground is. These people take care of their own ground and their own timber and their own property. They manage it properly. This is some of yours up in here, isn't it?
No, not yet.
Not yet. And
I mean, there's a little tiny piece of private right there that wasn't well managed, and isn't it?
So you can see clearly the difference. Look at this stand of timber here, and look at right here. No fire, no char, and right here where it was real dense, it just went through.
Out.
Yeah. So it goes. It's just like a magnet to these fires. If you don't properly manage it, if you don't thin it out, you don't keep the ground fuel out.
It's a lot different than western Oregon. Those are rainforests. These are high desert forests.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is all new to me. I'm learning a great deal.
It's when you have your west side forests, they historically burn every 2 or 4 or 600 years, and you had a catastrophic fire.
Yeah.
Okay. These burnt every few years, and you almost never had a catastrophic fire. You had real low intense underburns where it just creeped around.
Yeah. And it did it frequently, so it kept the ground fuel level down, kept the trees from getting too dense, right?
Yep.
Look at that.
That was private ground there.
It's just a barren rock now.
But that was all harvested. So.
It's the sheriff after somebody. And this is Canyon Creek. This is what's supposed to handle all this melted snow this spring.
That drains an enormous area, that little creek.
Wow. All that we just drove through, and the incredible amount of snow they've gotten this year.
40-some thousand acres that creek drains, and it's almost all catastrophically burned.
Wow.
So you're going to see.
That's going to be something else.
The studies done on that is 10 times the flow. So you'll see this highway gone.
10 times. It's going to be 10 times the flow that there typically is.
It can reach. Okay, same condition before the fire. Say you had a high water before the fire. You had the exact same conditions after the fire. It'll be 10 times the volume of water running.
Wow.
So if you have a catastrophic flood like they had in 1964, if you have that type of circumstance, for town, that was a catastrophic flood, it'll be 10 times that.
Oh, and my word.
The high water will come a lot quicker too, and then you'll have all kinds of debris.
That could do more damage than the fires did.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
Because it's going to reach the lower elevations.
It's going to wipe out 2 towns.
Yeah.
Our 2 biggest towns in this county, and it's not a matter of if it'll do it; it's when. It's when we get a wet year. Last year, the year after the fire, is one of the driest years ever seen. This is my property right here.
Up the hill there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was all manicured.
Yeah, you can see it's not real dense. You cut.
Well,
so.
I cut everything down that's dead. So.
Oh, you did.
And I ripped it, and I've already planted about half of that back with trees. So.
Oh yeah.
So I got to jump on it. But.
And you're one guy. And what have they done on their ground?
None.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I logged probably 1,000 acres of private land on this fire. So probably over 1,000. I logged this piece. I logged 3 pieces there.
All your ground, or did
I
you
logged
log
all
other
my
people's
ground.
too?
Then on the front side of the mountains, I logged another. See, that's all new.
Yeah.
And that burnt in the 90s too.
That's Forest Service up there.
That's BLM.
BLM.
This is
up there.
BLM right above us here.
And still, now this looks to be maybe.
I'll drive you up here on my property, and you can look across, and I'll show you some other things. I was here when it burned. In fact, when this all burned, I was on my property moving equipment. When this other fire that we just drove from for 20 minutes, when it came in, I was on this bridge, and I had a broken leg because I had just broken my leg. That's why I left my house. So, but I was on this bridge here, and the winds that hit us were in excess of 100 miles an hour. I thought it was going to flip our rig over.
Oh my word!
And
the winds were created from the fire.
It was pitch black, and all you could see was the flames, and they were racing up this draw here at 100 plus miles an hour, just tight against the ground. I've never seen fire. It was gasifying everything. The air was so hot, it was making the needles release gas and just exploding it.
And you were able to. Did you head out, or did you stay here and try to?
We turned around. My best friend and my brother's son-in-law were trapped at my one house, and they kept it from burning. The wind blew so hard it literally tore the roof off the house, all the shingles. This is new. That had to be that burnt down.
This house somehow survived. There's not a lot of fuel
around. It survived, but the eaves caught on fire on this house, and no one was there, and somehow went out. But this burnt down. There's one of my junk skidders.
Almost 2 years ago, still. You see
this guy just bought this piece. He's got a little 10-acre piece here, but I'll probably help him finish cutting the dead stuff down on that.
How'd you break your leg?
I was trying to get stuff out of my house, and I fell down. Just a simple fall down. And
trying to get stuff out of your house in case it burned?
Yeah.
You're in a little bit of a hurry, I imagine.
Yeah, and I just stumbled. I fell down 100 times harder than that. These people lost their shop in the barn. They just melted the siding off their house. I had my hay truck and welder in the shop.
Oh boy.
They got screwed by their insurance company too.
Yeah, you get through the fires, and then you got to deal with the.
And some of these insurance companies just hose you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they try to minimize their losses.
See, I've built all these new fences. I could build 17,000 feet of fence out this way.
Yeah, what's the cost of fencing?
I think about $14,000 a mile.
$14,000 a mile. And just in fencing alone, how much did you lose?
Oh, probably $120,000.
Jesus. That's just in fencing. That's not timber. That's not strutters. That's not houses.
And there's people who lost a lot more than me. There's people that have 50 or 60 miles of fence or 100 miles of fence.
Yeah.
And what you do is you have these fences to break your pastures up so you can graze it to keep the fine fuels down, and you don't want to overgraze, so that's why you have so many fences to break so you can move your cows. Right now, our neighbors, we have cows on a piece of ground we shouldn't even have them on in the winter, but we're having to do that because we don't have our fences up. It takes a lot of. This isn't easy fence building.
No, this is some rough terrain and very, very steep in a lot of areas.
House is there. decks back on it, but I got a roof on it.
Now, did that house burn, or did
no,
it just get?
It survived, and that's because my best friend and my brother's son-in-law got trapped there. They kept throwing buckets of water on the house, and then they finally figured out we had a gen set there, so they fired it up, got the pump going.
And this is your ground here.
All this.
So this is what maintained forest looks like.
This is managed forest.
Yeah. It's
the ground's spotless.
Yeah.
As clean as you can get it, and the trees are spaced out.
Yeah. It's remarkable. Even from here you can see the difference. If you look across the way there up on that hillside, you can see how dense the timbers are, and in contrast here. And what you can't see is all the fuel on the ground because it all burned off in that fire. But if you'd seen that before, what you'd see is a lot of debris down, and basically a fuel source for the fire, which allowed that fire to go. So
this got hit harder than any other part of this fire, and yet it still has green trees because it was managed and the fuel loads were so low.
And this is what happens when a fire goes through a properly managed area, right? The fire went through here, right?
Yeah, it blew through here at 100 miles an hour plus.
You can see just a little bit of evidence of it having been here, but in large, everything's still green and thriving and doing well.
It damaged a lot of the trees, but it took a half a mile of managed timber to lay this fire to the ground. We got hit about 3 in the afternoon here, which is the hottest, lowest humidity part of the day, which is when a fire cranks the hottest. So if this wasn't managed, it would have went down this canyon, and about the end of my property is what's called a ventour. This canyon pipes down, and it would have sped up then, and it would have nuked town.
Oh, it would have funneled right into it. Oof. Yeah, it's remarkable, the devastation. It just went so far and so long, and it was probably 2 fires, very manageable, and one of them was in fact extinguished by the Forest Service, and then left, or at least they thought they extinguished it and left it, and then it rekindled. And the other one, they didn't have to be any big deal. But what I hear now, this is unverified. I'll qualify that. But I hear this so often that what a lot of these outfits do, whether they're private companies working for the Forest Service or the Forest Service themselves, is they'll kind of play around with the fire and kind of keep it going, but try to keep it under control. I don't know whether they use that as a source to burn the fuel loads, or a method to burn the fuel loads, or if they're it does ask the question, or beg the question, are they doing it just to, the more acres of fire there is, the more revenue there is for fighting it, so it probably doesn't behoove them to extinguish the fires real rapidly because they make less money. So they don't have the same incentives and motives and motivations that we have, and these property owners here have and stuff, because they want to get Tad here and these people up here, they want to get that fire out right now, as soon as most expedient possible way, and more than anything, they want to prevent it from actually being able to run in the first place. But when they get it out quickly, and the Forest Service and what these agencies and stuff tend to do is they tend to play with it a little bit.
See that large tree clean across the canyon? It's got a little bit of green in the top.
Yeah.
My corner of my property is just a little bit over where that slide V's.
Yeah.
My property, that's where it corners.
Oh, you got property on that side too. Good Lord.
There's 10 acres on that side of the canyon.
Huh. Is that all private ground over there?
Nope, that's all public land on 2 sides of me there.
I'll be darned.
That was the BLM's project. that they did here, probably 10, 12 years ago. They thinned and logged that.
Is there road access up in there?
No, clean up on top. Then I own property, clean up on top.
Yeah.
See, this never even burned. Because we grazed it hard.
It's very open, and you can see a distinct difference.
And all this land next to us on the mill is the mill's land, and I logged and fed and cleaned up on that for probably 15 years. Otherwise, it would have moved too far.
Kill this for a minute to preserve our memory here.